How many of you identify with that video, right? The idea of, you're going to bed that night and you can't sleep and you start thinking about all the things that are going on and you become overwhelmed by the amount of anxiety that you're feeling and you begin to feel like you're drowning. It just sometimes, the challenge that we go through are just so difficult and, then you add anxiety on top of it. It really is a challenge. And here's the thing, is they're finding that more and more people today are wrestling or struggling with anxiety, which is one of the reasons why I decided to talk about it as a series. So there was a survey that was done in 2020. It was the most recent one I could find, but it was just asking people if they struggle with anxiety. 50% of the people surveyed that 18 to 24 years old said yes, they struggle with anxiety. 38% of those that were 25 to 49 said they struggle with anxiety. 50 to 64 was 30, and 65 was 20. Those numbers rising. And then you may be wondering, what about 12 to 17-year-olds? Found that about 21% of those, answered that they struggle with anxiety. But they also began to find out that for many of the teenagers that struggle with anxiety, the problem is just being able to be self-aware that I am anxious, that I'm wrestling with anxiety, or sometimes being able to report that they do so accurately was a little bit of a challenge, but it really is an issue. Now, across the board, they found that women are more likely to struggle with anxiety than men, across the board. That was just on average. And then there are three basic causes of anxiety. One is the chemical imbalance that happens in our bodies. Now, here's the thing that I found really interesting as I was researching it. And they found that sometimes what we can do is we can actually change our own chemical imbalance, our chemical balance, to cause us to become imbalanced and struggle with anxiety that much more. And the way that they found it is because of, when you're stressed out, your levels of adrenaline begin to kick in and your body responds to your body responds to situations like you're in danger kind of idea. And so, there's not like a lion coming at you or anything like that. But for us, the danger is, man, I got to pay that bill. The danger is, I got to make this presentation, like those kind of things. Our body still reacts to it in the same way. And they found that if you stay in that heightened level enough, then what it begins to do, it actually begins to change your own body chemistry and causes an imbalance that causes you to struggle with anxiety that much more. They also found, of course, another cause is just environmental factors, trauma, challenges. Those are the things that we just deal with every day. And then some of it is heredity. If your parents are people that struggle with anxiety, there's a possibility that it may be passed on to you. Now, is it nature or nurture? That may be the challenge going back and forth, but that's something that they have found as well. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting is, for those of you that know, I have been meeting with a counselor to work through some things from my past. And one of the days we were having a conversation about anxiety because I didn't think I struggled with anxiety very much. And she was like, Ken, I think you're a lot more stressed out than what you think. And so we began to just talk about, my struggles and wrestles and that kind of thing. And then as we're talking, like more and more things start to come in mind. And I was like, oh, wow, so that was impacted by anxiety. But I just kind of reasoned it away. I'll give you a couple of examples. One was when I was younger, I was a huge football fan. And I wanted to play football. But I always told myself, well, my family, my mom's a single mom. I don't know if we'll be able to afford it. So I just never asked her. But in working with my counselor, I began to realize that that's part of it. That was the part that I reasoned away. But the other part of it was I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. So I was afraid that, I wouldn't make the team. So as a result of that, I never asked. Another one was going to the prom. I didn't go to my prom. And I said, well, I didn't go to my prom because same idea. I didn't want to ask my mom for the money. But the reality is, if I would have asked, my mom would have figured out a way to make it happen. It would have happened. But what I began to realize later, after having this conversation with my counselor, is, the real reason why I didn't go to prom was because I was too afraid to ask. I was too afraid that if I would ask, I would get turned down. So after the prom, grad night. So we go to grad night. We're all waiting to get on the bus. I'm dressed to the T. I got my hat on. Just picture like Smooth Criminal, but cooler. So that was me at that point. So I'm standing there, and this girl named Nicole Green walks up to me, and we were friends. We've been friends throughout high school. And she said, if you would have asked me to go to the prom with you, I would have gone. That's like, well, you tell me that now? You tell me, well, what about hanging out tonight? Let's hang out for grad night. And she's like, I'm sorry, I'm actually here with my prom date. So I was like, ugh. Kind of thing as well. But I wonder how many of us have missed out on incredible opportunities due to struggling with anxiety. How many of us have come with that? So you know that the Bible actually has a solution to anxiety? It's Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. It says, always be full of joy. I say it again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. The Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. His peace will guard your hearts and mind. So as I'm looking at this passage, I'm seeing several pieces of advice when it comes to dealing with anxiety. The first thing it says is rejoice. Is rejoice. Well, the idea of rejoicing isn't that I rejoice for my problems, right? Because that's a little bit crazy. But I can rejoice in my problems. So how do I rejoice in my challenge? How do I rejoice in what's causing me anxiety? Is I look for reasons to rejoice. Because you know what happens with anxiety is we're looking for what? The worst, right? We're looking for how things won't work out. We're looking for how things will fall apart. And so what rejoicing is basically saying is, look opposite of that. Like look for the things that are going well. Look for the things that are coming together. Look for the way that you're growing, things that you're developing. That's the idea behind rejoicing. And as I was going over the message this morning, this really stood out to me, where it talked about, and be considerate to others. And as I'm reading that passage, I realized, how many times have we been inconsiderate to people because we were anxious? How many times? And I thought, oh, that's an uncomfortable question, right? So rejoice, look for the best, be considerate to others. And then one of the things I love about the Bible is whenever the Bible tells you what not to do, it also gives you something to replace it with. Because haven't you had that experience too, where somebody tells you not to do something, and does it really help? Like when you're feeling anxiety and somebody says, hey, don't worry. Well, great, thank you. Thank you, works. That worked perfectly. Now I am ready to move on and celebrate life. Thank you for your insight, Mr. Wonderful. Thank you. No, the reality is, whenever the Bible tells us not to do something or to stop doing something, it gives us an idea what to replace it with. So it says, don't worry. Then it says, pray about all things. So simply put, you have a choice. Worry or pray. Worry or pray. One drains your spirit, the other lifts your spirit. Worry or pray. One causes you to focus on the circumstance, the other causes you to focus on God. Worry or pray. Which is it that we will do? So it says, pray about everything. Pray about everything. And as you're praying about it, be honest in your prayer. We kind of talked about that when we talked about doubts last week. Be honest in your prayer. Like, God, I'm frustrated. I'm really irritated. I'm anxious. I'm worried. I don't know how this is going to work out. Bring it all before Him. And then it says this. It says, and then thank Him for all He has done. Thank Him for all He has done. So literally what it's saying is, as you're looking forward, remember what God has done in your past. That's what it's, remember. So as you're moving forward, God, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know how you have moved in my past. So God, I thank you because I know that I can trust you. I know that I can rely on you. I know that I can depend on you. So if we put these things together, if we are rejoicing, if we're being considerate, if we are praying about everything, if we are thankful, then what happens is it says that the peace of God will guard our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So it's just a reminder of when it comes to this anxiety that there is a solution. As a matter of fact, you can see it right on the screen. Prayer is a way to connect with God for strength to endure, not a lucky charm, to make your problems go away. So I want to make that really clear. Sometimes we do approach prayer like a lucky charm. Right? So with the idea of lucky charm, let me rub my lucky rabbit's foot and everything will work out and all the problems will go away. Okay, that's not what prayer is for. Sometimes there are things that we would pray about and we won't get the result that we desire. It won't work out the way that we thought. And so in those moments, it's going to be that much more important for us to lean on God, to depend on him, to trust in him. So prayer is not, it's not a lucky charm. And I think sometimes, I've seen it where people are like, well, pray about it. Well, when they say pray about it, basically what they're saying is, just pray about it, God's going to work everything out. He may, or he may not. So, but what the purpose of prayer is prayer is not a fix-all that I just pour on everything and everything works out. No, the purpose of prayer is, God, in this moment, I'm connecting with you, I'm trusting in you, I'm relying on you, I'm depending on you, and together, God, as I walk in you, that somehow I will be able to overcome. Whether it's I get the results that I want, or if I don't get the results that I want, God, I trust in you. That's the thing that will help us with being able to navigate anxiety in our lives. And so here's what we're going to do today, is we're going to look at a guy named Elijah. Now, you may remember last year we did a series on Elijah, and we kind of just walked through the events of his life and looked at how we can apply them to our lives as well. But there are some lessons that we can learn from him when it comes to being able to learn how to navigate anxiety in our lives. And one of the things I love about Elijah is that his struggle with anxiety came after an immediate success. So, because, sometimes we think we struggle with anxiety, and we think sometimes anxiety can be a pattern in our lives. Sometimes we can be flying high and everything's going well, and then all of a sudden there's a threat, there's a challenge, there's a problem, and then boom, we find ourselves back in anxiety once again. So basically, as you look through the story of Elijah, you see God doing incredible miracles through him. But the one success that he really had, that he's really known for, is there's a God competition. And the idea of this competition is to prove who the real God is. And so it's Elijah by himself, and he's competing against 850 other prophets from the other God. And so they kind of do their thing, and nothing happens. He does his thing. Fire falls from heaven. Boom. It's incredible. It's amazing. And back in biblical times, like if you had that competition, like a God-off, if you had like the God UFC, that kind of thing, then whoever lost that battle would lose their lives. And so Elijah wins this, and 850 prophets, they lost that battle. So what happens is the king of Israel at that point, who happens to believe the same way that those prophets believed, he comes home, and he's pretty dejected. And what happens here, you can see in 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 and 2, it says, when Ahab got home, he told Jezebel, which is his wife, Queen Jezebel, everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah: may the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you killed them. Now, again, realize that Elijah has just come off this big moment. The moment that Elijah came off of is kind of like they can take our land, but they cannot take our freedom. That kind of moment, or what we do today echoes in eternity. Like that kind of moment, like dun, 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 like that kind of moment. That's the moment that Elijah has. Flying high now. This his moment. It's his moment. And he stands up. And you would think, after having a battle like that where he comes out, you would think he'd be like, Bring the threat. Bring it on. I got game, baby. My God is good. Like, you would think that would be his response. You think that would be his response? Which also shows the power of a woman. And I'll say, because here's what he does. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 3 and 4. It says, Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He goes up against 850 men, and boom, one woman threatens him, and he runs for his life. But it goes on. I just think it's really interesting. It goes on. It says, he went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who've already died. So realize that at this point, his anxiety and fear are kicking in incredibly. And it's so much so that, and haven't we done that when we feel anxious and then we begin to become overwhelmed in our anxiety? Don't we want to say these two words, I what? Quit. I'm out. Done. Tap out. When it comes to anxiety sometimes, that's what we feel. And so Elijah's feeling the same thing that you feel. Where we say, I can't do this task. I can't pay this bill. I can't work in this relationship. I can't. And then sometimes what happens is I can't becomes you can't. You can't fix this out. You can't change this. God, you can't fix this. You can't. I can't. You can't. I'm out. I'm out. And I'm sure that many of us in this room have felt that or struggled with that, where we just quit mentally. And here's one thing that I've found is, did you know that fighting anxiety really is a two-front war? Fighting anxiety really is a two-front war because you are fighting what's in front of you, but you're also fighting what's in you. And the reality is, no one wins a two-front war without some support, without some encouragement, without some strength, without someone being able to come by and support and uplift and encourage. And here's the thing. The reason why anxiety becomes that much more difficult is because the power of anxiety is the lie. Let me say that again. The power of anxiety is the lie. And we may not realize this. We may not realize that our anxiety is being driven because there are some lies that we're beginning to embrace, or maybe have embraced. There's some lies that we are believing. There's some lies that are now driving the car. We say, Jesus, take the wheel. Well, the lies have taken the wheel. The lies are driving the car. And so the challenge is we have to figure out, how do I begin to overcome those lies that I'm being fed by anxiety and really beginning to be able to move forward. And here's the thing that's really important too, because I think sometimes when it comes to truth, we think, you know what, I hear the truth, boom, it's done. Boom, I'm healed. Boom, I'm changed. I heard the truth. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. We are all good. We're all good. But reality is not like that. The change that needs to happen in our spirit doesn't work that same way. About a month ago, I had an ear infection that was in both ears. So I had ears infections. Well, you know what I mean. In both ears. And so, I went to the doctor, and the doctor gave me, I think it was amoxicillin, and so basically it's an antibiotic. And she said, take this once, and it'll go away. Is that what she said? Has anyone ever had an antibacterial regimen, an antibiotic regimen? Do you just take it once? No. You have to take, so it was like, take this once a day for the next 7 days, And then eventually what will happen is it will go away. Now, and the thing that's really interesting is you take it the first day and guess what? My ears are still plugged. I take it the second day and guess what? My ears are still plugged. Day 6, I'm in. My ears are less plugged, but they're still plugged. And even after day 7, I thought, man, it was, even though I finished regimen on day 7, it still took about like day 10 till my hearing was clear once again. So I'm saying all that to say this, that if you really want to begin to overcome the lies of anxiety, what you have to do is you constantly have to expose yourself to the truth. Is you have to take the antibiotic of truth to begin to move out the bacteria of the lie that's infecting you, that's causing the problem, that's causing the issue. Matter of fact, you can see this on the screen as well. Truth is the antibiotic for the lies we believe. Daily exposure to the truth is the only way to eradicate the power of the lie. So what you have to do is you have to continue to remind yourself, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth. Maybe what you could do, for those of you that are technologically, adapt, you could do this. For those of you that are not, ask your children or grandchildren. But what you could do is maybe put the truth as a screensaver on your phone. And then every time, on your lock screen, so every time you feel stressed out, you kind of pick it up and you kind of remind yourself of the truth. And you're seeing that every time you pick up your phone, you remind yourself, oh, this is the truth, this is the truth. But find ways to constantly expose yourself to the truth so that way you can begin to change the lie that's become deeply rooted in your psyche. So here's what we're going to do, is we're going to look at the 5 lies that either we believe or that can cause anxiety. The 5 lies that either we believe or that can cause anxiety. Lie number 1, I can do it all. I can do it. And aren't we taught that in our society? You can do it all. You can do, and then you know what happens is you're looking through your feed and you're seeing like, oh, and you're seeing like because no one ever says that like, I blew it today, right? You rarely see that as people, and I think it's fun. I'm not judging people for that. Celebrate your successes. Communicate those. But I think sometimes the problem is, for us, is we begin to see success after success after success after success that's in our feed, and then we look at ourselves and we struggle and we struggle and we struggle and we struggle. And then we look at like people that seems like they're doing it all, and we're doing nothing, and we're feeling overwhelmed, right? Now I'm on a 3-front war. My problem, what's going on, and everybody sucks that's successful, right? So now we're struggling with that because their success, I can't compete with that. And here's the truth, you can't. You can't. Let me throw out these 3 words. Self-made man or woman. Don't we celebrate the self-made man or woman? You know, and it looks like they picked themselves up by their bootstraps. And they were able to process and carry their way through, and they became successful, the self-made man or the self-made woman. Here's the truth, though, and we forget this. No one's ever successful by themselves. No one. Show me anyone that's successful and claims that they made themselves a success, and I will show you somewhere along the line where someone gave them a break, where someone opened the door, where someone helped them to be successful. But when we believe I can do it all, you talk about producing anxiety, right? Remember that old commercial? I could bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, and never let you forget your All right, you guys remember, okay. All right, so I can tell you guys remember, I can tell you, these guys are going, what is he doing? You know, because that was like from what, the 70s, Ageline, you know, that commercial. But it's the idea that we can do it all, and that hasn't changed. But the reality is that's not true. And here's the thing that's really interesting, is when I begin to become overwhelmed by things that I'm dealing with, even doable things become impossible. Have you noticed that? When I become overwhelmed, even doable things become impossible. Elijah said this in 1 Kings chapter 3. He said, I'm done. I've had enough. Now here's what it says in 1 Kings 19, verses 5 and 6. It says, then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. So the journey that Elijah takes, he goes from a city called Beersheba to an area called Mount Sinai. The journey itself is about 260 miles. So now, if we want to do the math for that, and I wrote it down because I won't remember, but it took him 40 days to do it. So 40 days, he would need to travel 6.5 miles a day. The average person walks about 3 miles per hour. So that would mean he'd only really need to walk about 2 hours, right, per day. So you kind of look at that, and you think, well, that's doable. But part of that journey, Elijah quit and was done. Why? Because the reality is, trying to do everything makes even the small tasks impossible. Impossible. So when we begin to understand the reality of that, then it's important to understand this, is that you are a limited resource. You are. You're a limited resource. You're limited in your time. You're limited in your energy. You're limited in your focus. You are a limited resource. So the problem is, when a limited resource tries to do it all, that limited resource becomes what? Burned out. That's why I love Elijah's solution. What was it? Sleep. Rest. Some of you are anxious because really you're burned out. So one of the best things you could do in order to curb your anxiety, take a nap. Take a nap. And you could even spiritualize that. Like you could say to your husband and wife, I'm going to go in the bedroom and pray a very long time. Because you may not realize this. Sleep is a statement of faith. Do you realize that? Sleep is a statement of faith. And so in a statement of faith, you're saying, God, I am relinquishing control to you while I rest. That's why I call it prayer. So it's okay for you to sleep during the message, because I realize you're praying. All right, but with that in mind, so here's the truth. The truth is, you see right on the screen, I am a limited resource. So I need to be selective about where I put my time and my focus. Some of you, I'm going to teach you a word right now that's going to curb the anxiety in your life. You ready for that word? That's it. It's no. Feel free to tell people no. Can you? No. No. Feel free to tell, you can tell me no. You can tell me no. No. Pastor Ken, no. I don't have the time. I can't. No. I might respond back, well, are you putting your job before Jesus? No, just kidding. I wouldn't do that. But some pastors do, don't they? Some pastors do. So if that ever happens, tell your pastor this. Are you putting your job before Jesus? Well, actually, since Jesus gave me the job, because that's what you preach about. Jesus gave me the job. So all of that was given to me by Jesus. So by me choosing to do my job, I'm actually serving Jesus. All right? But hopefully you won't have to use that with me. All right, so here's the second lie. The second lie that we believe is this. I have to do it alone. I have to do it alone. I have to do it alone. It says this in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4. It says, then he went, what? He went on what? Alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors for whom you have already died. So, as we look at this, sometimes we fall into that mentality. I can do it all, and not only can I do it all, I can do it all by myself. Right? I can do it all by myself. So that's why you see why I play cajon and TJ sings, right? But I can do it all by myself. When God created us, he made a very simple statement. And the simple statement was this: it is not good for man to be what? Alone. Alone. Now, if there's anyone who could have handled the weight of this world on his own shoulders by himself, it would have been Jesus. Correct? Correct? However, the first thing that Jesus did before he started his ministry is he went out and found 12 guys to support him. 12 guys he could invest in, yeah, but they were also his support system too. So the reality is, if Jesus needs friends, so do we. We can't. And as long as we try to do it all alone, we are going to burn ourselves out as well. And it's interesting too, because there are certain things that we glorify that seems to glorify that aloneness. I'll throw out these two words: multitasking. Right? So I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. I'm spinning the plate. I'm spinning the plate. I'm spinning the plate. Oh, and now the plate's still going. The plate's still going. The plate's still going. Oh, now I can add another plate. Now I'm spinning the plate. I'm spinning the plate. Crash. Right? Because the reality is, and here's the truth: some of us are more gifted at multitasking than others. Right? My wife, gifted. Me, not at all. Not even remotely close. But the reality is, we're not meant to do it all alone. And that's the truth. And you can see that here. Success is a result of community, not individuality. Success is a result of community, not individuality. Here's a third lie of anxiety. No matter what I do, it'll never work out. No matter what I do, it'll never work out. Because anxiety causes us to focus on everything that can go wrong. Exactly. I love that. You guys, great finishes. But it focuses on everything that can go wrong. Here's Elijah. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 10, Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord, the God Almighty. But the people of Israel, and this is what we do, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I am the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. It's about us looking at the possibility of everything that could go wrong. And sometimes as we look at the possibility of everything that can go wrong, what we do is, again, we get overwhelmed, and so we quit. Or we look at everything that can go wrong, and so we don't even try. We don't even try. And I've shared this, and I say this a lot because I really hope that it will inspire you, and I really hope that you don't make the same mistake that I made in my life. On Thursday, I submitted my last assignment of my first semester of seminary. Now, for some of you are going, why are they clapping? Okay, good. Go clap. No, but for some of you who may be new, one of the reasons why that's such a huge achievement for me is because for many years I didn't go to seminary because I was afraid. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to handle the work, or I was afraid I wouldn't be able to find balance. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to do it. And so, this year, my wife believed in me, and so I decided to give it a chance and be able to go for it. And so with that, but let me tell you though, the reason why I was able to be successful this year is because I was able to lean on other people for support. I was able to lean on other people for guidance. I was able to lean on other people for insight on how to be able to manage my schedule. There's some growth that happened this year as a result of it. So it's not like I pulled myself up. I just tried to lean on as many resources as possible to help me with this process. But I want to say this, like, if I had not allowed fear to get in the way, at this point, I actually would have already graduated with my master's degree. So that's why I'm saying it, is I just don't want you to stop yourself. And let me tell you, like, as a pastor, this aspect of anxiety can be a struggle. I mean, it really can, especially because we live in a society that celebrates what? Success, right? That celebrates success. And that even works itself into the church arena. And so I've gone to conferences where, guys will be like, yeah, we prayed to the Lord and we went to start our church, and the very first week we had 700 people show up and there was lines around the corner. God is good. Meanwhile, those of us who are sitting, that we're thinking, our church service is averaging 20 to 30 people a week. And so it creates anxiety because you begin to think, well, I'm not as sharp as those guys. I'm not as insightful as those guys. There's something different about those guys. There was one point where I stopped posting on social media for a while. And I think one of the reasons why I did was because I was comparing myself to, the guys that, I guess the celebrity pastors, right, that are on Instagram, and they are influencers, and they get hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes maybe millions of views, and I get like hundreds. And you compare yourself, and so the anxiety begins to kick in. I'm not as good, I'm not as talented, I'm not as called, I'm not as blessed. All of that begins. And then what happens is that spills over into the way that I pastor. Because now what happens is I'm afraid to try things because I'm not as good, I'm not as called, I'm not as talented. It's probably going to fail. So my anxiety begins to kick in that way as well. And then I found about a guy his name is Carl Vaders. He's a small church pastor. And he's written some really great things to encourage small church pastors. And he wrote this, and I thought this was really powerful, and it really began to change my thinking. He said, your biggest problem in ministry and in life isn't that you'll make a mistake, but that you'll be consumed by the fear of making mistakes. I thought, oh. And that statement kind of set me free. And then, what happened is I started going ahead, and I started posting again. And I started looking at it a different way. Like this week, the post was a clip of the sermon from last week, and it reached 177 different accounts. Now I'm looking at that and realizing, some of that are people I never would have reached if I never would have posted anything. And then the video itself had 254 plays. Now, is that viral? Not by definition. However, of those 254 plays, 49 of them were replays. In other words, somebody saw it and thought, I'll watch it again, And then, of the people that I've reached, I think it was something like 60% of those were people who don't follow Encounter on Instagram. So those are people that I've had a chance to be able to reach and touch that I never would have if I would have never just taken the risk to go for it. But that's what anxiety does. It causes us to compare ourselves with others and then to think that we're less than others. We're not as qualified. We're not as gifted. We're not as talented. Well, God is not asking you to be any of those things. And I realized, you know what God is asking me to be? Me. Just be me. And I'll reach who I reach. I'll bless who I bless. And Ken, I will bless people through you. Just be you. Which brings us to this truth. I can do hard things with God's help and vision. I can do hard things with God's help and vision. And then the final one is God is absent when I need him most. That's the final lie. God is absent when I need him most. It says this in 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 12 and 13. And this is really well, let me step back for a little bit. So there's this point where God says, okay, Elijah, now get up and go to Mount Sinai. So Elijah goes to Mount Sinai. When Elijah gets there, God says, come on out. I'm going to spend some time with you. And so then what happens is, it says, there's this massive earthquake. Like there's this massive earthquake. And Elijah realized God was not in the earthquake. And it says there was this massive wind that came along and it was breaking rocks. Like it was huge. And Elijah realized that God was not in the wind. And then there was this fire. Like there was this fire that came along and was consuming everything. And Elijah realized that God's not in the fire. So you know what we learn from that? Is that God is not in earth, wind, and fire. So you don't have to remember the 21st night of September. No. But then what happens is in 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 12 and 13, it says this. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And a voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I wonder if sometimes we miss God's presence in our anxiety because we're looking at earth, wind, and fire, and we're expecting God to show up big. And as I'm processing this, I'm starting to think, well, why whisper? Why would God whisper? And then it hit me. Well, in order for me to hear when someone is whispering, I have to be what? I have to be quiet, and I have to be close. Because isn't that what we do? Like if somebody whispers, we go, what? What? And we, what? We get closer so that we can hear. Also, what I've learned is God is not interested in competing with the noise in your life. Because if God just becomes another noise in your life, then the odds are what we will do is we will drown him out. Because he will become connected with all the other noise. I mean, think about this. You get in your car and you close the door, boom. And what do you have? Silence. And sometimes when we have silence, what is our reaction? Exactly. And I wonder if we miss God in those moments of anxiety because we are so caught up in that anxiety where our bodies are all tense, our brain is pounding, our hearts are beating. And so as a result of that, we're actually not even in a place where we can hear God. Even if God screamed, we wouldn't be in a place. But we finally get to that point where we're now in silence and we breathe. The Bible said that Jesus Christ often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Now that makes sense. He was getting away from the noise to go spend time with his dad. And so I just want to encourage you with that as well. That maybe the reason why you're not hearing God in your anxiety is because you're too busy focused on the noise, being focused on the noise. Find that moment of silence. And maybe then you'll have that voice that speaks. Which brings us to the truth, and that is God is always with me. God is always with me. I may not recognize it, but he's always with me. And so with that hearing encounter, one of the things that we want to try to help every one of us do is we want you to be able to walk away with something practical that you can apply to your life as a result of the message. And usually in that practicality, we look at how do we love God, how do we love others, and how do we love ourselves. So we say love up. So the encouragement to love up as a result of this message is pursue God, especially in the silence. Pursue him, especially in the silence. Love out and loving others. Don't do this journey alone. Find someone that you can trust to walk through this journey with you. And love in. Give yourself daily doses of truth so that you can overcome the bacteria of the lie that is infecting your system. Jesus, I thank you. I thank you for who you are and for the way that you make yourself known to us. And God, I just pray that today we would be able to put our trust, our reliance, and dependence upon you. I pray that maybe as a result of the message today, in some way that we are inspired. Inspired because, God, you love us. And God, you walk through our challenges with us. Again, God, you love us, and you want to whisper into our hearts and our lives. So, Father, I want to pray for anyone who's either watching the live stream or anyone who's in this room right now. And, Father, if they are caught in their anxiety and they're overwhelmed and stressed out, Father, I pray that today would be the day of release, that they would be able to find themselves in the silence and just be able to trust you because you are good and you care about us and want us to know you. And all these things we ask in your name. Amen.